Welcome to the Confident Dollar Podcast, where we are seeking to bring confidence and organization to your financial life. Welcome to the Confident Dollar Podcast. I am excited that you guys are joining here today for another episode to continue to teach you about your finances and build confidence when it comes to your money and making financial decisions. So that is the goal of this podcast, to continue to build confidence with you in your finances. In an age where there's so much information and there's so much to take in all the time, I want to help decipher that for you here in just small bite-sized episodes that you can understand. No jargon, no financial speak, so you have no clue what I'm talking about. No, in your terms, understand and start learning about money and investing and debt payoff and all of those things so you can manage your money better. So that is the goal of the Confident Dollar Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Lauren, and I have been in the financial services industry for 13 years. So pretty crazy. It's gone by pretty quickly. I've been an advisor for 7 of those years, and I'm also an entrepreneur. I started my own financial planning firm 4.5 years ago, Sela Portfolios and Planning, located in Orange County, California, but serving clients across the nation. And so I have had a good amount of these conversations around money, around all the things that we talk about on this podcast. So that is the experience that I bring here to the table to be able to get these out to more than just my clients. So I want to treat you as if you are my client. If I'm teaching you when you've walked in my doors how to manage your money, I wanted to do that on a mass scale. So this obviously made sense in starting this podcast and getting these out to people to help continue to teach people how to manage their money and build confidence in that. So thank you for joining. Today we are talking about 401ks, old 401ks, what you should be doing with your old 401ks and what your options are when you change employers. So it's crazy to think that I saw statistics put out by Capitalize that there are $1.65 trillion in old 401ks left behind. That is so much. So I think it boiled down to like 29 million 401ks are forgotten. So I don't know specifically if they just mean like they're actually forgotten, they haven't had anybody reach out to them in a certain amount of time, or if it's just people that have moved on and left those assets behind. I'm a little bit unclear. But regardless, that is a ton of assets, and that is a lot of people, 29 million people that have left a retirement account somewhere that they did not move with them, and they potentially don't even know where it is, or that forgot that they even had it. So things are too expensive to go around like that. That's crazy to me. You cannot be having just so much in retirement savings that you just like forget that things are, with your previous employer. But the reality is that we change jobs pretty often, and things get busy when you change jobs, and you think you're going to deal with that later, and then you never do. And so, all of a sudden you're 5, 10, 15 years down the line, and you have totally forgot to do anything with that old 401k. So take this as your sign, if you are listening to this today, that, okay, now is the time for me to actually sit down when I get home tonight and deal with what I'm going to do with that old 401k at my last 2 or 3 jobs. So that it ends up being what's happened. People change jobs and they just leave this trail of 401ks behind them at every single job, and they don't do anything with them. So what are your options? What are you even able to do with your old 401ks? We're going to talk about 4 options that you have with old 401k or 403b or just employer plans, retirement plans. That's what we're talking about today, is employer retirement plans. So the benefits that you get through your employer, the amount that's pulled out of your paycheck, and maybe you've had matched from your employer during those periods of time too. What do you do with those old accounts when you change jobs? So option number 1, probably why there are 1.65 trillion in assets left behind, is your first option is it can stay. It can stay in the previous 401k. So as long as your balance is over $5,000, they actually legally cannot do anything about it. It can stay, and that account can stay open at that previous employer. So if it's under 5,000, they can technically kick you out and cash that out to you, make you take it out. But if it's over that, they cannot do anything with it. So it can stay there. So I would say most people make this choice out of maybe laziness or not knowing what to do. This isn't really like the first choice to actually do. It's just what ends up happening to most people because they just never deal with it, or they just don't know quite what to do. So they just, freeze and it stays there. So that is choice number one, is it can stay there. Now, this does not seem very wise to me, because let's say, you've changed jobs, you have your 401k, it's got $25,000 in it, and you're doing pretty good. You don't really know what to do with it. So you keep it there. But then 401ks, they can change, companies can change who manages 401ks anytime they want. And so, you've been out of the job 10 years, you're doing something else, you're saving new retirement savings, you didn't move anything, but you missed the memo, you missed the mailing or the emails that's changed 401k management companies. And so it's moved on somewhere else that you now no longer know how to log into or get access to, and you don't really know anybody that works at that company anymore. And it's just a whole thing of having to track it down. So you, in my opinion, are risking a lot by leaving it behind at previous employers, because you just don't know what's going to change. And if you're going to, listen, we keep track of enough logins anyways. So to keep track of an old login and an old portal, that's not going to be a great thing. So I don't think this is the best option on the options that you have, but it is one of them. So I have to let you know that is an option. Option number 2 is you can cash it out. Now, if you do that and you are not over 59 and a half, you're going to pay 10% in penalties. You are also going to pay federal income tax on that and state income tax if you live in a place that has state income tax. So also not a great option, because if you don't want to have to pay penalties on something if you don't need to. And most people, again, do this, I would say, by accident, because maybe they think they're going to move it. They take the check, they cash it, then all of a sudden they've actually cashed it out. So some people might do that for the really smaller balances, but again, doesn't really make any sense, or not sure why you would ever do this, but that is an option that you have. You can technically cash it out. Again, you'd have to worry about the penalties if you're not 59 and a half. And that is a 10% penalty. Okay, so we kind of got the not so great options off the table. So what are your 2 main options for actually moving it and keeping it invested? You have 2 of them. First option is to roll it over to your new 401k plan. So once you are eligible in your new job to start your 401k, you can go back to your old 401k and you can ask them to process a rollover into your new 401k. So that is an option. Now, this will get everything combined for you. It keeps it all together. So everything is in 401k, or your employer plan. So if it's a 403b, just so you know, I'm going to keep referring to it as 401k, but it's any type of employer plan, from one employer plan to another. So you can do that. You can get it to your new 401k. It would then be invested in the investment options that you have for that new plan. It would be now combined and all together, and you would have access to that. It's now with you, with your most current account. So that is another option. Now, your last option is to roll it over into an IRA, individual retirement account, an IRA. So you can, if you don't want to keep it connected to your employer plans, you do not have to. You can take the old 401ks. Let's say you have multiple of them at this point because you've changed jobs a few times. You can take them and you can combine all of them into an IRA. Now, that is only as long as every contribution that you did in those were traditional contributions, and it could go into a traditional IRA. If you have any Roth contributions within old 401ks, you would have to open up a Roth IRA to move that into the Roth IRA instead. So the contribution type has to stay together, but that is what you can do. there are some pros to this option. This is now, it is in your name. It is at a place in which you want it to be held. So you get to choose where you're holding that IRA. Unlike your new employer plan, you don't have that choice, right? You get offered one employer plan. Where for your own IRA, you can choose where you want to hold it. You can choose if you would like to work with a professional, if you don't want to work with a professional and you want to do it yourself. So, and it's in your name. It is under your control. You now, wherever you're holding it, would choose your investment options. So oftentimes IRAs have more investment options than 401ks or employer plans. Because employer plans are just a specific plan that only offers specific investments within that plan. And since you can choose where you want to hold your IRA, you would have more options as far as what type of investments within that account. Then you'd also have more options over fees, right? So if you're choosing where to hold it, you can also assess fees. Your employer plan is going to have certain fees attached to it. There's nothing you can do about that. That's how they've set it up. Where if you have your own IRA, you can be mindful of fees if that is something that is important to you. Again, doing it yourself, choosing ETFs over mutual funds, or whether or not you hire a professional, are ways you could save on fees versus within an employer plan. Now, this might be confusing, and so just going to put this in there because whether or not you roll it over to a 401k or an IRA, also has, if you plan to do any backdoor Roth conversions, it's a lot simpler to keep these assets in a 401k in the employer plan rather than have it in an IRA. So that is something, if that is something on your list that you may do, then you might want to consult a financial professional first to see if it makes the most sense to roll it over into a 401k or an IRA. So if that part's confusing, that part may need a financial professional. But if you are aware of a backdoor Roth conversion, basically you do not want to have assets in IRA, since that would be part of the conversion equation, and the taxes as far as that. Anything that's in a 401k or employer plan doesn't have to be part of that conversion equation. So that's just kind of a little bit side note, but again, it's kind of showing you there are some pros and cons in deciding of whether or not you think it should roll over to the new 401k or into an IRA. So those are your options. Those are what you should, consider when you're figuring out which one you want to do. And then the process of that is pretty simple for both of those. You're going to go back into your portal of your previous 401k employer plan. You're going to do a rollover. You're going to process a rollover. If you have an IRA account, you would have to go open that account first, get that account number, and then you'll use that account number and where it's held, that information on that rollover process that you do. Most of the time you can do it online these days. And if not, you can call and you'll get some help with whoever the 401k is held through to have someone walk you through making sure it's rolled over properly. And then it's another little side note as you're doing it, if you're doing it you're rolling over into an IRA, there's two options. They will do a direct rollover and get that directly to the company that your IRA is held at. And that's great. You don't have to do anything with it. The other option is they will actually send the check to you and you have to forward it on. And just remember that you have 60 days to get that check deposited into the new IRA. Otherwise, it would be counted as a distribution versus a rollover. So you have that 60-day time period from when you've rolled it over and that check gets to you to get that check in and deposited into the IRA. If you go over that, you'll be counted as distribution. You'll get some tax documents on both sides, just so you know, for reference for your next tax year. You would get a distribution from your rollover showing that was sent out, and then you'll get a tax document from the new IRA showing you that was received. So that's how you could show the IRS both sides of that rollover equation for your taxes. So don't be one of the 29 million people that forgets about old retirement assets. Make sure you take your money with you. It is so important for your long-term financial planning to keep track and move your old 401k and employer plans, because you want to make sure they're invested properly. You want to make sure you're invested as you should be, so you can maximize as much growth as possible before you need to take these out in retirement. You don't want to have to get 10, 15 years down the line and figure out 5 different 401ks or where they are and get them all together. Do this as you go. It is a lot simpler than you think. There are also tools to help you make it very simple. And if anything, this is where it does help to hire a professional. Let me tell you and remind you, it will be a whole lot cheaper to hire a professional to help you keep track and move your old retirement assets than to forget about them and leave them where they are. So, pros and cons of figuring out where to spend your money. So, I hope that's helpful for you. Don't forget your old 401k assets. Move them with you one way or another, and make sure you are on track for your long-term financial savings. Side note to another side note that I've had on here, a few side notes as I'm talking through the 401ks. Make sure you always turn on your 401k match, at least minimum. So even if you like to contribute more into your Roth IRA or your IRA rather than your employer plan, please make sure you at least put on your minimum match so that you are taking advantage of that free money, because that is free money and that will go a long ways for your retirement. Hope you guys all have a good day, and we will be back together on the next episode. If this is helpful for you, please send to a friend who might also find it helpful. Please subscribe and leave a review, as those help me build this and get this to more ears and more people. So make sure you spread the love, and have a good rest of your day. Lauren Gage is a registered representative with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax and legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal.